Hello and welcome to Rotted Review of the Day, and Merry Christmas. It is actually Christmas as I'm recording this here. It is December 25th, and Merry Christmas to all of you out there as we engage in the last review of this advent calendar of 2018's Christmas horror movie awesomeness. And we end on what I believe is a fairly strong note. It's actually my favorite Christmas horror movie out there, which is A Christmas Horror Story, made in 2015. I had seen this a year or two previous, and that was the only time I've seen it up until last night, and I watched it again with family and friends to give myself a refresher so that I could be the most in tune as possible for this review. And I will say it's the kind of movie that tends to not deteriorate, but not have as much of an impact after the first watch. But regardless, it was still a fantastic movie, and to get into why I consider it to be my favorite, let's get into the categories. As always, 4 different categories, each one worth up to 25 points for a total possible score of 100 points. And this is an anthology horror tale that is a bit unique. The stories are all interwoven throughout. It'll hop from one to the other, back to the first one, back to the second, and just kind of all over the place until they all wrap themselves up at the end, which is a fairly unique way of telling an anthology horror story. Usually you have kind of a binding element, and then it tells the first story, goes back to the binding, second story, back to the binding, third story. To have it all interwoven like this, it's a little bit jarring until, once you figure out what is actually happening here. But the one thing I really liked about it is that all the stories are interwoven. There are small anchors that lead from one to the other, to the other, to the other. So they're all taking place within the same world. And if there is a binding storyline, it is that of William Shatner playing Dangerous Dan, or radio DJ, for a small town radio station, and the small town is where these things are taking place. Some of them are kind of haunting elements. Some of them are kind of more monstery Krampus elements. There's a segment of this that takes place at the North Pole with Santa Claus fighting a legion of his elves that wind up getting in a zombie virus infection and having to fight them off. All told, all of the plot lines I thought worked really, really well. And they were all so unique that I really don't want to go into too much detail on any particular one of them for fear of giving away the whole farm on them. Suffice it to say, I don't think that there was a single storyline in this that was a bad one, and all of them were worth watching. And whatever weaknesses they might have throughout are all saved in the final moments of the film. And that's really where this wound up going. Is I gave the plot a 20 out of 25, and I will say this, it would have been lower. It would have been a fair bit lower, probably around 15 or so, until the last 5 minutes of the movie. And then the way everything bundled together, wrapped up, and put the most festive, I can't believe they did that kind of bow on it, really, really elevated this movie beyond the above average that I was thinking it was throughout. That's when it turned into exceptional, and really one of my highest recommendations is because of the last 5 minutes of the movie. But regardless, the rest of the movie is absolutely worth watching as well. It just ends on such a spectacular note, and I think that's why the second watching was a bit watered down, was knowing what I know now. It brings that level of information back to the rest of the movie for me, and that sledgehammer home that I had on the first watch wasn't there on the second. But that's just kind of the nature of movies such as this. The Intent, I gave a 23 out of 25. This was fun. This was scary, legitimately scary, and I've been wanting that. This was Christmassy, this was gory, and ultimately just very entertaining. The one element of there, I know I harp on this, and I have over the last several reviews, is I really wanted some Christmas horror movie that scared me. And there were some that shocked, and some that, Black Christmas was a fantastic movie. The 1974 original was just amazing. I had never seen that before delving into this advent calendar, and I really think, well, this channel more than anything else, but I really think this opportunity and this advent calendar and so forth to really broaden my horizons. These are movies that I would never have watched, and some of them have been absolute dogs and really struggled to get through. But I've had some real gems come across my eyeballs, and I love it for it. But this was the first movie that I can think of that was Christmas and horror and scary. There were really some good, haunting, scary elements of this one. Great visuals that just chilled you to the bone. And I think, having watched 25 films now, I will say that so far that seems to be a bit unique. Sadly, I have enough to do a second year's worth, or well, another 25. So I can do another advent calendar in 2019, and I absolutely will, and we'll see what comes about then. But so far, of the last 25 movies, this was absolutely the scariest. But it was also fun and super Christmassy. So all told, I think the intention of it was well met. The acting, I gave an 18 out of 25. There was really nothing terrible about any performance in this. There were some really great performances as well. George Buza as Santa in the zombie elf thing was really, really good. It was really interesting to have a jolly, but at the same time, real badass fighting Santa happen on screen there. Really, I just don't think that there was a bad performance in there. Even William Shatner, hamming it up and being as Shatner-esque as he could, he lent a gravitas to it as things got more desperate and mournful as the movie continued on. His performance got more toned down and melancholy, and it was almost heartbreaking. It was actually watching your fun uncle start to get sad when he tells a story. It was like, oh, Uncle Bill. The acting I really had no complaints about. The technical, I gave a 20 out of 25. Very impressive visuals all throughout. The monster creation, the CG, the blood work, the gore, all of that worked. But really, I think the most impressive part of this was the editing. The fact that it did do the interwoven stories, and the editing was so tight that it managed to tie everything together, hop from one to the other, without ever breaking pacing. At no point was I so invested in a storyline that when it hopped to the next one, I thought, oh, crud, now we're on this one. It really flowed well. It knew when to wrap up this branch here, move on to the next, and then come back to it. And the editing was just amazing in that regard. I really, really loved it, which gives us a total of 81 out of 100 points. In my opinion, this is not the best Christmas movie, and this is not the best horror movie. And after having seen some real gems of classics like Black Christmas, the original, I would say that this is not the best horror movie set during Christmas. But this is the best Christmas horror movie I can think of, and it's the one I most highly recommend. And by that, I mean how Christmassy it is, how much it encapsulates the spirit and the vibe of Christmas, the fact that it has Santa in his workshop. It is a Christmas movie. It's not just a slasher movie that happens to have some pine trees and lights in the background. So by that criteria, I would absolutely recommend A Christmas Horror Story 2015. It is absolutely worth a watch, and it's something that I will be initiating friends and family into for years to come. If they come by for Christmas Eve and they haven't seen it, you're going to see it. And that's just the way of it. Thank you for joining me here today. Merry Christmas again. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow when we get back on track with just regular old horror movies. In the meantime, next time you want to watch a horror movie, first make sure that it's good and rotted.